Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Performer on Record, the official podcast of Performer Magazine. Hopefully, this week you're hearing the benefits of a new pop filtered windscreen combination that we've got in place on our microphone here in studio. So, for those of you who are complaining loudly, vocally, the past 2 episodes, you'll be pleased to note that hopefully all the plosive explosions are a thing of the So with that out of the way, let's get on to episode 3. If you don't know me, my name is Benjamin Ricci. I am the editor at Performer Magazine. We are a print publication for musicians. We've been in print for over 30 years, also online at performermag.com. So if you haven't had a chance, please do head to the website, learn a little bit more about us and what we cover. Typically in any given month, we're doing articles on music business, career advice for independent artists, features on independent musicians that have put out new records, and all sorts of things related to gear reviews, gear advice, and studio tips. So that's a little bit about us. If you haven't had a chance to listen to episodes 1 and 2, you can do that in your podcast service of choice. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, the new Amazon platform that's coming out, basically anywhere and everywhere that you can enjoy your podcast. We did recently put out a little notice on Instagram, sort of a self-congratulatory notice, if I do say so, and I am saying so, because I've been with the magazine personally for 10 years now. This is my 10-year anniversary with Performer. So I'm going to go ahead and pat myself on the back since we're socially distancing and there's no one here to do that for me. But we did put out a quick little questionnaire on Instagram Live when that happened this summer, asking people if they had any questions about the magazine in general or my 10-year experience here out of the 30 years that the magazine has actually been around. So we did get a couple of questions, and I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability now. Just bear with me. Question number 1 comes from Daisy Markel on Instagram. What are some of the best interviews that you've had a chance to be a part of in the past 10 years, either famous artists or non-famous artists? That is an excellent question. We typically publish about 3 to 4 interviews a month with musicians. We mostly cover indie bands or bands on small labels. When we do cover larger bands, it's usually like an artist, like someone who's really heavily invested in songwriting, someone who indie artists respect. So from that standpoint, I tend to cover some of the more well-known people, and then our freelance writers will typically cover a lot of the independent artists who are either on the way up or signed to labels that you might know and love, things like that. So from my own experience, there are a couple of interviews that do stand out over the past 10 years. One that immediately comes to mind is Angelo and Norwood from Fishbone. Fishbone is a band that I grew up with, was very heavily into throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. And they were just kind of this wonderful mishmash of punk and ska energy at a time when I was really finding punk for the first time and finding ska for the first time. So to interview those guys about their new record a couple years back was a real treat. Angelo's a hoot. If you know anything about the band, they have a great documentary out, which I'm sure you can find on Amazon or Netflix or one of the streaming services. You can probably find it on DVD for cheap now. But the Fishbone story is a really great one. They're a band that kind of got overlooked a little, is maybe the wrong word, but definitely didn't get their fair due. I guess it's hard to say because, you know, a lot of musicians do cite them as an influence. I know Sublime and No Doubt were big fans. You'll see Fishbone shirts pop up in movies all the time. John Cusack is a big champion of the band and has been for a long time, but they're one of those groups that I just loved personally. So it was really great to have. The other interview that stands out for me is probably Dave Pirner from Soul Asylum, another one of the more well-known artists that we've covered. So that's not a super fair representation of all of the bands that we cover, because most of them are indie bands, DIY bands, things like that. But Fishbone and Dave Pirner stand out. Dave actually was incredibly generous with his time. Soul Asylum had just put out a new record. This is maybe 3-4 years ago. The one with the monkey on the cover. It's fantastic. It's got some great singles on there. I thought it was one of the best things that they had ever done. And I had about 20 minutes scheduled with him. And that's not unusual. When we schedule interviews with artists, if they're not as well known, and especially if they're not on tour, we can usually get a little bit more time with them. It's ideal to have a writer sit down face to face. Obviously, that's the best scenario. Worst case scenario is we do a phoner. We set that up ahead of time with the publicist or the band's label, and we usually try to schedule out about 30 minutes. It's a good enough time where you can get really good quotes and information about whatever the band's working on, whether you're interviewing them about a tour or a new vinyl release or whatever the case might be. But it's not so much time that you run out of things to say. Anyway, Dave Pirner is fairly well known. I didn't want to take up too much of his time. We were given 20 minutes. That's great. That's about all I needed. He's done a million interviews, so he knows how to whip through these things pretty quick. We get into it. We talk about the new record at length, which is great. That's what I wanted to cover. And then we get into some other stuff. And Dave was really generous. He gave me over an hour of his time, his personal time. He didn't have to do that. We talked about things that I just wanted to know about personally, things like his guitar setup, things is, the minutia of how to set up a bridge on his Telecaster or a Jazzmaster. And we talked about the Mastery Bridge, which is a product out of Minnesota, where he's from. We talked about music that he had done for films that no one really asked him about a lot, especially things like the score to Chasing Amy, what happened with the soundtrack release to that, why there was none, where is all that music stored. So if you haven't read that, head over to performermag.com. All of that stuff is archived, so you can check out past interviews, any of the articles that we've done, any of the music business stuff that we've covered, any of the gear tips, studio tips. It's all there. So those are some of the standout interviews for me, and there's just a plethora of information. Let's move on to one of the other questions. What are some of the favorite covers of the magazine that you've done? So for me, I was a reader of Performer before I started working here a decade ago. And there are a number of covers that I picked up when I was a teenager. One that I remember is, and don't laugh, it's the Stained cover. It's one of the more famous covers we've done before Stained really hit big on the nationwide level. They were still a local Massachusetts band. But of some of the ones that I've done, I really like some of the special edition covers that we've put out over the past few years. We did one called the Tape Issue, where we kind of recreated the old Maxell poster of the guy being blown back in his chair, which I thought was really cool. We did a good job on that. I also really liked the touring issue that we did with the screaming females on the cover. It's a really intense live shot of the band kind of writhing around the floor that I thought was a wonderful way to capture the energy of that group. Great band, and I was really happy. Let's see. I also like the Tycho cover that we did recently, where we kind of mimicked his visual style. If you know what a Tycho album cover looks like, or a poster, you can kind of get a sense for what we did with the cover to kind of honor him as part of his most recent release, where we interviewed him. You can check that out on the website, obviously, too. Just type in Tycho in the search bar, and you'll see what that looks like. Some of the other ones that I really enjoyed, I liked the social justice issue we did a couple years back, where we kind of did a play on the old Sex Pistols album cover. I really enjoyed one we put out, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, with a band called Tijuana Sweetheart. It was a really awesome shot of their drummer, and she's at kind of this toy drum set with the band's logo and her arms up in the air and everything flailing. That was a really great shot that we were able to get. And let's see, I'll pick one more, and I'm going to go with the photo issue that we did. Now, this is a photo shoot that we did down in Atlanta, and it celebrates photography in music. And we had an artist on the cover with his guitar kind of shooting his camera straight at the camera that was shooting him, and he's surrounded by a whole bunch of kind of old-fashioned analog film equipment. I thought that one came out really well. It was pretty striking. But, I've done almost 100 covers here personally. I know this kind of sounds like the Ben Ricci congratulation hour, and I'm not meaning it to be like that, but I do have some favorites. We're proud of the work that we do. I'm proud of the work that we do. Hopefully everybody else here is as well. I'm not just speaking for myself. But, we do have favorites, and those are some of those. Let's kind of burn through the rest of the questions here so we don't take up too much time, and we can get to our main interview today with the wonderful Haley Reardon, an artist actually from Massachusetts. I'll call her Massachusetts / Nashville, because she spent a lot of time down in Nashville to honing her craft. One more question. How do I get featured in the mag? Well, I thought this was going to be a quick one, but it's not going to be. This is something we get more than anything. We get this from bands. We get this from labels, from publicists. How do I get my band featured in the magazine or on the website? And there's no real great, step-by-step guide to do that. We're pretty approachable, so you could just email us directly, either editorial@performermag.com or ben@performermag.com. You can reach me directly. I'm pretty accessible by email. Either reach out to us yourself, have your publicist or label or manager do it, whoever represents you best, whoever you trust, and pitch us on what you've got going on. It's got to be somewhat interesting. There's a million bands out there whose entire story is, we're a band, we formed, we made music. That's not really super interesting unless the music is so incredibly amazing we can't overlook it. And we've had those cases where the band, not everybody has a story. That's fine. But the music was so good, we had to write about it. We had to cover it. And those instances aren't few and far between. I mean, there's a lot of independent bands who just blow me away that we have to cover in some way or another. And sometimes they implode a year later and they don't exist, and sometimes they go on to great success. We've been a lot of bands' first covers, which we're pretty proud of. But as far as getting in the mag, pitch me on why we should be interested. One of the things that we try to do when we write an article is think about our reader flipping through pages or browsing on a website. They're going to come across a headline and they're going to ask, what's in it for me? Why am I going to bother to read this article? Why am I going to bother to click on this link? So you've got to think of that too when you're approaching a magazine or a radio station or whoever. What's in it for them? And load them up with some ammunition that they can't really ignore. If there's a really interesting story in it for them, if you've got, a killer song premiere, if you've got an exclusive video that would be great for them, know their audience, know who we reach. We get a lot of requests from people who just don't fit into what we do, and that's not a slam on them or what they do. It's just, if you read the magazine or look at the website, you can kind of see the types of things we cover and the types of things we don't. So we're probably not going to cover your polka band from Sheboygan. Sorry to any polka bands out there from Sheboygan, but probably not going to happen unless you're doing something super creative, like you're an EDM polka band. I don't know. That sounds kind of neat. Send me that record. As far as sending your music, that's a good segue. We do have some guidelines up on the website. I'll say it 1,000 times, performermag.com. Head there. All the info you need. You can send us a copy of your record to our P.O. Box. I will listen to everything. I might not listen to all of it if it's terrible, but we put everything on the stereo, give it a fair chance. Every CD, every tape, every record we get. And we do still get a fair amount of physical releases. But if you've got something streaming that's easy to get to, that's not like just an Apple Music or Spotify link, like if you have an actual link where I can listen to the entire thing, that's great. Don't make me pay for your music. I know that's a really kind of arrogant thing to say, but you really shouldn't be sending someone a purchase link on your website. It's really kind of not cool. It's one of those unwritten rules that shouldn't really have to be unwritten. It should just be written. Don't send an editor of a magazine a link to purchase your stuff. Send them your music. Just send it. And if you're not willing to invest in hosting your tracks on a streaming site like SoundCloud or Bandcamp for editors to check out, I don't know what to tell you. If you're not willing to invest the $2 to mail me a CD, why should I invest the time in you, I guess, is what I would shoot back. And I know, again, that sounds kind of arrogant and dickish, and I don't mean it to be, but that's kind of the reality. And I'm one of the nicer people. So if you're up against a more big time magazine with more big time editors who have a more big time attitude, they're going to be a lot less nice than me. So things to keep in mind: approach us respectfully. Send us your music, send us relevant information about you so we know who you are. Links are always helpful. I can't tell you how many emails we get from bands or publicists who just say, hey, check out, my band so-and-so, and it's just coming from a Gmail address and they don't include any links. So it's hard to look them up, especially when they have a name that they didn't research ahead of time and there's 5 other bands with that name. So, I'm just trying to arm you with the best information possible so that you can give not just me, but anybody you're approaching in the industry, the best information that they can have to make a decision. So that's kind of my general advice on that front. Have amazing music that can't be overlooked. I mean, that's the core of everything. Even if your story isn't all that interesting, if the music speaks for itself, that's really all that matters. Your look isn't super important to me anyway. If you don't have amazing photos, it's not going to hurt your chances. It definitely helps if you've got great studio stuff already. It saves me from setting up a new photo shoot, but that's certainly something we're willing to do if we love you enough. We've done it, 1,000 times over the past few decades. So that's not, a deal breaker either, but something that, maybe is good to have, good photos, investing in something good to help, bolster your look, or at least something where I can get a sense of who you are, even if your personality shines through and it's just an iPhone shot. I mean, most people's phones now can shoot 4K video and wonderful portraits. So there's no excuse. Send a decent photo so we know who you are. Send amazing music so we can't say no. And if you have a story, that's kind of third on the list. If there's something interesting that sets you apart, let people know that. Because if it comes up, to a choice between you and someone else, and you look good in a magazine and your music is amazing and you've got a new record that just has to get out there, and you're up against someone else who maybe has a leg up on you, you might lose out that opportunity. Maybe not in our magazine, but maybe somewhere else. So again, these are just kind of general things that I would throw out there. Hopefully they're helpful to you. But that's my 2 cents. I've talked for a very, very long time, and I haven't answered all of the questions, but there is one more quick one before we get to our main interview that I'll touch upon as succinctly as I can. I am not a person who is succinct, so I apologize in advance. If you listen to episodes 1 and 2, you know that by now, and you'd also know that I just slipped into my radio voice for my own amusement. This final question that we got on Instagram Live is, have you noticed any industry trends or things, that grammar is very poor in their question, but I'll reword it on the fly, or any things at the magazine that have changed since you started as editor? So I started in 2010. Things were going for about 20 years before I even hopped on board, but there have definitely been some things that have changed. The biggest one that comes to mind is the amount of physical releases we get sent for review has diminished probably tenfold since I started. When I got here, we had buckets and buckets of physical compact discs, tapes, and records coming into the office on a daily basis. Now, the amount of music we get has probably increased. If anything, it's gone up. More people have access to the tools to make records now at home, especially now when everybody's on quarantine, but even well before that. So we're getting more music. We're just getting more of it digitally, and that's fine. If you have a physical release, that's great. Send it to us. We like, ripping things open and artwork and all that traditional stuff, but again, not a deal breaker. What else has changed? Certainly one of the biggest seismic shifts I think I've seen as someone who receives a lot of music, and I'm sure the listening public has seen this too, is just the shift from groups to solo artists. If you look 10 years ago at the amount of stuff we were getting in the mail, the vast majority of it was bands, like rock bands, indie bands, hip-hop groups in general. People clustering in groups of 3 to 4 people to make music as a cohesive unit. Now, 10 years later in 2020, we do get a fair amount of bands, traditional, indie bands, for sure. But things are skewed much more towards the solo artists. And I think that's a product of the tools. If you can make a record on your own with an interface and a guitar and a microphone, a lot of people are just doing that. So they're not finding the need to form a band anymore to meet their musical goals. A lot of people are just dabbling. So they're not even interested in forming a band in the first place. They're just doing their own thing. So that's a big trend that we've seen, the move away from bands to singular artists as an entity, and just the incredible rise of electronic instrumentation and synths in the entire landscape of music, even the indie bands. 10 years ago, I don't think a synth would be found on maybe more than 5% of the indie records that we got from bands. Now when we're getting records, it's full of synths, and it's great. There's been this big analog revival. You can get stuff from Behringer for next to nothing that basically sounds like an old mini Moog. So if you've got $200 to invest, you can have a killer setup at your fingertips, a hardware setup. And of course, the big thing that's happened in the past decade, from when I started, is all the software plugins, the virtual instruments, VSTs, audio units, anything under the sun that you can, plug into your DAW to make music with. We've heard it all. So if you have a MIDI controller, or even you're just using a keyboard that's hooked up to your laptop, you can pretty much get any sound under the sun these days, either for free or almost next to nothing. So the rise of electronic instrumentation in traditional rock music and indie music in general, it's overtaking guitar. I mean, we don't hear a ton of guitar-based music anymore, either on the radio or on Spotify or on YouTube. It's just kind of dwindled in popularity. So those are the trends that I've seen. Why don't we take a break now and hear a word from our sponsor? This episode and all episodes of Performer on Record are brought to you by our wonderful premier podcast sponsor, Elixir Strings. We only use Elixir Strings here at Performer because their protective coating keeps our strings in the office full of life, better than any other brand we've ever tried. And when we're reviewing stomp boxes, amplifiers, recording gear, interfaces every month, we don't want anything distracting us from that job, like the hassle and expense of constantly changing strings. It's a headache. And we know that you don't want anything getting in the way of making your music either. So say goodbye to corrosion and dirt and sweat and oil and gunky buildup and use Elixir Strings. Their proprietary featherweight coating acts as a wonderful barrier against all that tone-sucking buildup on your guitar and bass strings, and it allows you not to get lost fiddling around. More information is available. Just head to elixirstrings.com. Check out our YouTube channel for a ton of demos featuring electric, acoustic, and more from Elixir. And join the Elixir revolution. That's my copy, not theirs. So don't tell them. All right, back to the show. All right, so enough of me yapping. Let's get on to the main feature. This is our recent interview with the wonderful singer-songwriter from Massachusetts/Nashville, Haley Reardon. Haley was our recent Elixir Strings Artist of the Month, so you can check out some really cool videos she helped us out with for our YouTube channel, where she demos the Elixir acoustic strings. You'll see her stringing up and performing an original song, so definitely go check that out, because she did an awesome job, and I think the video is up to almost 100,000 views right now, so that's going strong. You should give that a listen. And without any further jabbering from me, here is our interview with Haley Reardon. All right, so we are here with Haley Reardon, who was our most recent Elixir Strings Artist of the Month for this past month. And she did a really great job. If you haven't checked out some of the videos that she put together for us, head on over to our YouTube channel or any of our social media pages and give those a watch. But Haley, thanks for hopping on with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, what I'd love to do is give our listeners a little bit of background about you, kind of where you came from musically, what you're up to now. So, if we can go back and maybe get a sense of how you kind of got started with music and the guitar and everything, that would be really great.
Yeah, definitely. I'm from the North Shore, north of Boston, and I don't know, grew up with a guitar around the house that never got played, sitting in a corner somewhere. And one summer when I was really young, I was like 11, headed to sixth grade, I picked up the guitar and started learning to play, and then sort of immediately felt drawn to writing. That was the exciting part for me, was like learning an instrument was a vehicle to write songs, which I'd always written poems and things. So it just felt like that was the exciting part. That's what I was always drawn to. And that's always been my passion. And like guitar, learning more about guitar has always been a means to learn more about writing. And same thing with everything. And I kind of found my way in the sort of New England folk scene, and then moved to Nashville for a little while and moved back home. And anyway, play folk clubs and listening rooms and do the singer-songwriter thing.
So you started initially kind of as a way to spark your songwriting process. Now, you said you moved to Nashville and came back. Can you give us a little bit of insight onto kind of what sparked the move, what you found down in Nashville? I think that would be great for our listeners to learn, because a lot of them are probably contemplating the same thing. So to hear it from someone who's been there and lived there and done it would be really great.
Yeah. Well, I moved there when I went to college initially at Belmont University, which is in Nashville. So I went there when I was like 18 and had just graduated high school to go to college at Belmont, which I did for 2 years. So that was like one chapter of my Nashville life, which was very centered around Belmont and the community there, because I was in school. And then I left school and continued to live in Nashville for another like year and a half. And was sort of touring on and off during that period. And yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I met a lot of really wonderful people. It really is like they say, like your Uber driver, your, waiter, everybody's a musician.
Yeah.
Like unbelievably so. So, and the level of talent is amazing. And it's really cool to see, people really doing it. I missed home a lot, even just like on a personal level, geographically, it wasn't where I belonged. And I think I struggled to be creative for that reason, even though creativity is alive and well there.
Yeah.
But I just ended up wanting to go elsewhere. But it's a wonderful place. There's a lot of magic happening there. So
Would you see yourself ever going back professionally, or are you kind of over the whole Nashville thing?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, maybe, nothing's out of the cards, but I just didn't quite feel like myself there. Like maybe someday I'll find my way back, but there's a lot of other places that interest me in the meantime, so it would be farther down the list since I've already sort of given it a stab,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that makes sense. I think a lot of people go outside their comfort zone to see what that even is. And maybe people don't even know what their comfort zone is, so they got to explore things and find out what works for them creatively. And when you find that, I think you've certainly found that, it's really good to kind of learn what that looks like. Maybe you can walk us through your creative process, how you sit down to write a song, or how that sort of evolves naturally for you, as a kind of creative outlet for your work.
Yeah, just as you said, I mean, that was the thing about my time in Nashville is that for me it's not separate. It's not like, oh, well, I'm here for professional reasons, but like in a broader life sense, I don't love it here. They're so intertwined for me. Like my life experience directly results in my songs.
Right.
So, which is kind of why I love, to me, building a career as a songwriter is like building a life that's inspiring and fulfilling, because that's the engine of like my song. So I'm very relaxed in that sense. Like I kind of believe I have to go out and have interesting experiences and be present in my life in order to then go back and write, rather than sitting and like banging my head against the guitar. Maybe I'm too lackadaisical, but that's how I've come to approach it. So yeah, I kind of wait for inspiration to come, and I do everything all at once when it does. I have never written like lyrics separate from melody or a guitar part separate from the rest of the song, so
So that's all kind of one process for you.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, I gather pieces, and I mean, I think of myself, when I'm not sitting with a guitar, I think of myself as like a storyteller and an observer, and I'm kind of gathering details and stuff, and then when it feels like there's something there, I kind of sit down and just kind of see what comes out. So it's very, I don't know, mystical. And I keep it that way. Like, I like the sort of magic component of it. So
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear you talk about your career, because obviously I'm an outsider. I don't know your headspace when you're writing or performing, but I've gotten your records in the mail before, and I've listened to them, and I think we've covered you in the mag. So I know you primarily as a singer, and a singer-songwriter, of course. But obviously, the first thing that hits me is your voice, because that's what goes in the CD player. That's what goes in my Spotify playlist. So to hear you kind of explain your creative journey, it sounds like you almost see yourself or view yourself more as a songwriter first, unless I'm misunderstanding.
No, yeah, you're right. I do. And I think sometimes maybe I'm limiting myself in that sense, because I'm just a songwriter, but it's all one thing. I mean, the way I sing a song is all part of trying to convey whatever I'm trying to convey, and I almost think of it as like part of the essence of the song that I wrote,
Yeah.
But that's just my take on it. Obviously, I am all of those things, and I'm a musician and a singer and whatever. But yeah, I do see myself that way, probably because that's what I was most drawn to first, and remains the most interesting part of it all to me. That's the juicy part that I can never get enough of, is the actual writing.
So let me ask you this, because when we talk to artists, a lot of them have different perspectives on the songwriting process, especially those who consider themselves primarily songwriters in addition to being performers. Would you ever, or have you ever, sold your songs to other artists to perform? And if so, is it hard for you to listen to other people do your work if it is kind of that personal to you? I know that's sort of a loaded question.
No, yeah, well, it's a good one, and it's something I definitely explored when I was in Nashville, because obviously that's a great place for that, where, I remember being confused when I got there. People would say, do you want to be an artist or a writer? And I'd be like, what? Those are the same thing, the writer writes, they're an artist, they created it, But, so I did explore that, because I was like, yeah, songwriting is the engine for me, that's what I'm most drawn to, and I wouldn't be against it at all. If a song that I already wrote, someone said, hey, I want to cut that, of course, that would be awesome, but I don't know that I'm interested in, really pursuing that, going and writing for people, at this point, just because I am attached to the whole thing, and the way I've come to know it is
Sure.
feeling my own life and turning it into something, rather than being like, oh, this person needs a song about this. Let me get in that headspace. I'm not as excited by that process, but I've tried it, and it can be really fun, and I've made great friends in co-writes and doing that type of thing, but it's not necessarily where my attention's at now. But that said, I have no hang-ups about it. I would gladly let somebody sing my song. That would be cool to hear their interpretation of it. So
cool.
Yeah.
I guess we should address kind of the elephant in the room, which is if anybody's listening in the future and the world is still here, we're in the year 2020 where things are not going so hot, to say the least. And it's derailed a lot of musicians' plans, obviously, most notably in the live touring space. So I guess the question of the day is, did you have a tour or live gigs lined up that you either had to move or cancel, or what's going on with kind of your live situation right now? And I guess follow-up question before you even answer that is, what do you sort of see happening in the short-term and near-term future as far as live performance goes?
Yes. Yeah, I had kind of the most stuff I've ever had lined up.
Oh, no.
I know, but it's all gonna work out. It's okay. I have faith. But I was actually about to leave at the very end of March. I was going to do an artist residency program in Germany that I'd been invited to do by the city of Dachau, super random. So I was moving to Germany for 6 months, and I had basically 6 months worth of pretty heavy touring through that whole period all throughout Europe.
Okay.
And I was getting so nervous. I was like, should I do this? Should I not? And I'm very health conscious. I was very scared, and then the decision got totally made for me. Everything was canceled, honestly, very quickly.
Oh, boy.
So that all, got wiped out in one fell swoop.
So you had a major live thing locked in for almost the whole rest of the year. Okay.
Yes, and I Like I'm at my parents' house right now. I was awaiting leaving.
Sure.
I was going to go away for 6
Yeah.
months, so I didn't have any like life infrastructure set up. So yeah, so it definitely like threw me for a loop, but it's kind of comforting that it went all at once instead of like this ongoing game of like, okay, this Master Shows is canceled, now maybe we can play the next one,
Right.
and then that gets canceled. So that I'm hoping to have moved to next year. That's the goal as of now. It's the same time frame in 2021, like
Okay.
spring. And I'll go do the same thing, hopefully, because it still feels really like aligned, something I really want to do, personally and creatively, but time will tell. But I've been doing like online shows here. I've been doing them privately over Zoom, so they're not like, I'm trying to maintain the like intimacy of my normal show somehow. So I've been doing small groups where I can see them and they can see me and we can talk to each other.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, that's been nice. And yeah, I don't know what the future holds. I mean, I think a lot of things are going to change for sure, but and that's sad. I think a lot of places that I adore, I worry about at venues and artists and whatever, but I also think also lots of new fruitful things will come of it, because that's just how things like this work, right? Like, you know, things fall apart and then new things crop up. So I don't know, big question mark. Crazy.
So if I can ask you a little bit about the live streaming stuff, because I know a lot of artists that we've talked to have had sort of experiences on both sides of the spectrum. They've either loved it and it's been great and they've had a good time interacting with fans over video, and then we've had artists who are like, this is not for me, this is not replicating the live experience, I don't like it, it's almost, I'm too detached from the audience. But it sounds like, without putting words into your mouth, that you've had a little bit of a different experience. Yours has been a little bit more positive. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's been working for you, how you've set those up, how they're working, how you feel in front of the camera performing, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'm like super sheepish about social media, about like, I never do like lives or anything like that pre-corona. So I was very turned off. I was like, oh God, I don't want to sing to a wall with like the little, number in the corner just going up and down, and you're like, it's just a number,
Yeah.
And my show also does not really lend itself to that, because it's mostly a very intimate singer-songwriter show, me and a guitar telling stories. Like, it's not like I'm passing by on a Facebook feed,
Right.
So I initially didn't do anything when like everyone under the sun was doing all these videos, and I was feeling like, oh, am I, having that anxiety of like, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing and da-da-da. So that's why I came up with this plan eventually to use Zoom, where like, they can turn on their camera and I can see them, and to do small groups like privately. So I started asking my fans, do you want to gather a group of friends and then I'll play a show for you and your friends, which turned out to be amazing, because first of all they have to do is send out a link to their friends, but in the heart of quarantine, it was like, it gave them an excuse to get together. So I would play for an hour, and then I'd have this group of 20 people who all knew each other, haven't seen each other
Oh,
in
that's
months,
cool.
and
Okay.
they would all kind of chat, and I would be, so it felt like mutually like a gift. And then we do donations if you wanted to, and no worries if you didn't, and then it didn't feel like, because it was also a weird time to be, trying to sell anything.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
so it's worked out and felt like aligned for me, but I know everybody has a different, first of all, a different show, a different thing they're working with, but that has really aligned for like my particular fan base and thing.
So do you think that's something that you may continue, even, I mean, knock on wood, if there is a post coronavirus time period, that you might do kind of in your downtime while you're not on the road or doing live performances?
Yeah, I do think so, because I've always struggled. Like I said, I'm not super into social media, and I think sometimes I like struggle to keep up with my mailing list and all this stuff you're supposed to do to stay connected. And this has reminded me, like, I do have this village of people. Like, they're small but mighty, but they really are my people. And this has been a really cool way to connect virtually, which I always kind of wrote off the internet as like not real life.
Yeah.
And this I'm reimagining how I look at like the internet and how I can relate to my fans and like actually interact with them. So yeah, I think I will. I think or even just getting comfortable in that format. Like if I use it in a different way, like whatever. I don't know yet, but yeah, I will definitely continue to use the format.
I think I don't know yet is probably the most honest response anybody can have to anything right now.
Right. Yeah, I'm like, maybe. But I do. I have had a good enough experience that I am thinking about that.
Good.
How can I keep this going when, life is back to normal?
Well, that's
no
good.
substitute for a live show, but yeah.
No, it's definitely not. But I think some people are finding, hey, maybe this could supplement my live shows, or maybe while I'm, recording and people aren't seeing me on the road, this is something I can do to kind of keep that going. I would be remiss if I let you go before asking about how you're still liking the Elixir strings, because, like I had mentioned when we got on the phone here, you were our Artist of the Month last month. So again, reminder for anybody who hasn't checked out Haley's videos on our YouTube channel, please go do that because she did a wonderful job. So how are you liking the strings?
Oh, thank you. I love them. I really am. And they just kind of get better with time. They have such a nice, warm tone, and they feel so good to play. My mom is learning guitar.
Oh, that's awesome.
One of her projects. And she keeps stealing my guitar because she's like, these strings are just so much easier. She's like learning bar chords.
Yeah.
She's like, I can't do it on my guitar, but I can do it on your... My guitar is also like set up way nicer than hers, but but so she keeps stealing it. She's like, I love these strings, but yeah, they're great.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. I guess the last thing, for our listeners, is if you want to kind of give them a sense of what's next, now that Germany's off the table, what's to come? Are you working on a new record? Are you doing any recording kind of while the world is shut down? And then maybe let them know where they can find you online and social media, even though you're not, super into social media.
Yes, I know. I could get better at that. But, yeah, I'm writing on my own at home. I don't really do much home recording, especially not in my, in limbo situation right now. But I'm writing, and hopefully that will turn into something new between now and when the world gets up and running again. I'll put out an EP that I have ready to go, early next year, hopefully.
Awesome.
And yeah, and I'm doing my virtual shows if anyone's interested and wants to hop on one of those.
Where can people find you?
They can find me just under my name anywhere, like Haley Reardon. Instagram is just at Haley Reardon, HAYLEYREARDON. And same for my website. If you want to sign up for my email list on there, that's where I send out my updates on whatever, weird idea I have next. So, so my newsletter is the best place, but also Instagram, Facebook,
cool.
Website, whatever.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I heartily recommend Haley's music. Like I said, we've covered her in the magazine. We've reviewed some of her past records. Hopefully we'll be reviewing more of her records as they come out in the future. But if you have a chance, do check her out online. She's a wonderful singer-songwriter from here in Massachusetts. We don't get to talk to a lot of kind of local artists much anymore because we talk to folks from all over. So it's great to hear from someone from the New England area. Haley, I want to thank you so much for getting on with us here. We wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll chat with you again soon.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for always being such a supporter. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye. All right, that was our conversation with our previous Elixir Strings Artist of the Month, Haley Reardon. We wish Haley all the best, so definitely check her out on the website. And like I mentioned earlier, head on over to our YouTube channel. We've got a couple of recent clips with her from the summer where she tests out some Elixir acoustic strings and performs an original track for us. So that was really cool. Anyway, that wraps it up for this episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on your podcast service of choice. Go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2 if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. Check out the new issue of the magazine with guitar Gabby on the cover that just hit the streets and the website not too long ago. So that is available. And if you have a chance, head on over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Smash whatever buttons are available today on Instagram, and go on over and bookmark performermag.com if bookmarking is still a thing that you do. If you have any questions for us, again, my name is Ben. I'm the editor of Performer Magazine. You can always reach me at ben@performermag.com. Happy to answer any questions by email, or if you have a question that you'd like us to answer on air, we'd be happy to do that as well. So thanks again to our premier sponsor, Elixir Strings. Thanks again to Haley Reardon, and thanks again to you for listening. Catch you next time.